everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you have a micro that is performing well, then at some point you will ask yourself the question, should I leave this micro? And if so, at what point should I leave this micro? Should I wait until I get to the turnover threshold? Or should I stay as long as I possibly can, stay in here until I actually physically get pushed out? What's the best thing to do? Well, if you've been here before, then you probably know what my take on this is. But I also know that people do get very attached to their micros. They're easy, they're undemanding, you get used to having them around. It's a bit like having a pet. But I hope to prove to you today that the micro is not always your best friend. I'm going to look at 3 different price points and compare the micro with a couple of alternatives, and you can see that the micro is not always your best option. So I could have just as easily done this exercise with a micro BIC or with a micro commercial, but I chose a micro BNC, very much on my mind at the moment because the micro BNCs have just had this hike in cotisation, in social charges. And this particular one has a turnover of 70,000 euros. So just teetering on the edge of that turnover threshold. And probably if you're here, then you're spending quite a lot of time thinking, what should I do? Should I leave this micro? If so, when? And if so, what should I go to? Now, in this example, I have given you 10,000 euros in expenses, which obviously is a micro you can't deduct, but that doesn't mean that they're not there because they very much still are there. And once you've paid your social charges and your income tax, you're left with 35,500 euros. Now, your income tax may well be lower than this. This is income tax calculated for a single person with no children, and it's the only way that we can calculate a definite number for income tax, because if you are married but your partner is not earning, then your income tax liability will be lower. If you have children, then your income tax liability will be lower. But if your partner is earning, then your income tax liability is going to be calculated differently again. So it's only a single person, no children, that we can really be very sure of exactly how that's going to work out. If you feel that you are rich with 3,000 euros in your pocket every month, then that is great, but just do be aware that half of your turnover is disappearing. So although you may feel flush while the money's swishing around, actually a lot of it does leave. Now, at this point, if you're thinking, should I move on and what should I go to? A lot of people think that they can only or should only consider the Entreprise individuelle in the régime réel, because they think that this is going to be cheaper and easier to set up and run than a limited company. I've said before, and I'll say it again, that this regime is not kind to people with high turnovers and low expenses. And this is what happens. So here you can deduct your expenses. Your social charges are actually going to go up, even though your income tax is going down. And although you will probably have more in expenses here because you will have an accountant to pay, and if you have a decent accountant, then they will probably find you some more things that you can put through expenses that you were previously paying out of your pocket when you were in a micro. That is going to bring down your net profit, so it's going to reduce your cotisation somewhat and your income tax somewhat. But the reality is that you will not be tangibly better off than you were as a micro. However, if I set up a limited company, and here I am, I have deducted the same 10,000 euros in expenses, and in this case, I have not done anything clever or fancy. I have taken the whole of this profit as salary. So I've put that in my pocket there, and my social charges work out the same, but my income tax is lower. Why is that? Because when I take remuneration as the director of a limited company, I instantly get a 10% abatement on my remuneration. So I'm actually not being charged income tax on 60,000 euros. I'm being charged income tax on 54,000 euros. So that's why my income tax is lower, and that's why I end up with more in my pocket. So even though I haven't done anything clever, I haven't optimized my remuneration in any way, and I still end up with more money in my pocket than I did as a micro or as an entreprise individuelle. Now you may be saying, okay, but that's with 70,000 euros. I don't have 70,000 euros. I definitely shouldn't be thinking about changing if I'm not earning that much yet. So let's see what happens. So here we've got a micro with 50,000 euros in turnover. I've reduced the expenses. I've only given them 5,000 euros in expenses, lower turnover, lower expenses. And without going through all of the calculations, what you can see is as a micro, I'm left with 2,450. In the régime réel, I am less well off. I actually did a video all about how this regime is not kind to people with high turnovers and low expenses. If you want to watch that and find out what happens often, you can watch that down there. I'll link it at the end as well. But with my limited company, here I am. I've deducted the same 5,000 euros in expenses, and I've said I'm only going to pay myself 2,000 euros per month. Now, if I want more than that, or if I need more than that, I can very easily give myself more than that, because here, even after I've paid corporation tax, I still have 7,500 euros left in the company. So if I want to take a good part of that and pay myself, for example, rent for my home office, then I can do that. This money will move over here. I won't pay any social charges on it whatsoever. I will pay a small amount of income tax, but I can easily end up with the same amount of money net in my pocket that I had when I was a micro, and still have money left over in the company. So if you want to watch the video about how to pay yourself rent for your home office, then that's down here as well. Now, if we go to the other extreme and we look at somebody who's really wanted to stay in the micro and ride it until the wheels fall off, this person is doing 120,000 euros in turnover each year. I've increased their expenses, which seems only fair. So now they have 20,000 euros worth of expenses. And as a micro, they have 4,417 euros a month. In the régime réel, they actually are slightly better off. Proof that you're not supposed to stay in the micro for this long. If even the régime réel is kinder to you than the micro is, then it's just, I don't know how to make it more clear that the micro is not supposed to be exploited this far. You are supposed to leave it before you get to this point. But even though the régime réel is kinder to me than the micro is, slightly, then neither of them, I'm afraid, can compare with my limited company, because here I've decided to pay myself 3,750 euros a month. I've said that's fine for me. And probably for most people living a relatively quiet life in rural France, that's also fine for them. If you live in Paris and you have very different financial requirements, then obviously that's a whole other story. But for a lot of people, this will be enough. And again, if I do want or need more money, I can very easily take it, because I still have 18,700 euros left in my company. So we've done 3 different price points. We've done 50, 70 and 120, and my limited company has won every single time. So I hope that has convinced you. You may still be thinking that a limited company is expensive to set up and run. It is not necessarily the case. As you may know, I work with dogs. There is a link in the description. It will give you 2 months free. And for approximately 500 euros, you can have a limited company up and running. Micro BNCs, this is especially important for you now. Your social charges have just gone up and they're going to go up again. So your expenses are really starting to mount up now. If your business is doing well and you consider it's going to carry on doing well, then you can do better. And I really hope for you that this is a year you are going to do better. This has been helpful. I would really love it if you subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.